Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jesse, and today I'm bringing you my worst books of 2023 list. The shadiest video of the year is here, and I'm ready to talk about some books that are red flags for me. If these books are your favorite books of all time, you're a red flag. I'm joking. Somewhat. I honestly had a really great reading year. There were some duds in the mix, but for the most part, I loved more books than I hated books. I had more bangers than I had flops, and that I will take. I'm only going to be talking about my top 5 worst books of the year. I did have some other ones that could have made this list, but I'm not going to talk about them today. I only want to rip a few to shreds today and not be the biggest bummer ever, because sometimes talking about books that you don't like, well, it depends on the day. Sometimes it can be like really fun to like trash talk a book, and then there's days where it's like really just a bummer to talk about a book that you did not love. So I'm going to be sharing my top 5. Without further ado, let's get started. This is my worst books of 2023 list. The first one is a book that I do not own. Thank God, I borrowed it from the library. That book is Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. In this book, we've got 4 young people, 4 friendships, and 2 relationships. We follow them as they connect and converse over the world that they live in, and watch as they try to find beauty in the world, essentially. I'm just going to be straight with y'all. You want to know the biggest fault of this book? It's the fact that it's incredibly boring. There is some interesting character work done in this one, and it is a very character-driven story. Like, there's not even really much of a plot. The plot sort of falls to the sidelines. Like, it's there, but it's sort of just not the main focus. And I feel like, truthfully, this book needed more of a focus. It needed more of a plot line, which I get that, like, sometimes books like this work for people where it's just, like, vibes, just following characters talking and chilling and vibing. Like, I get it. I get that that's for some of y'all. But for me, it sometimes works. But for this situation in particular, it did not work. And I think it's because the characters, again, while there was some like interesting character work done here, the characters were mostly boring, and like the most interesting parts of the characters were things that were just kind of like mentioned in passing, and we never like delve deep into these things that are really interesting that are brought up just like briefly, which is such a sad scenario because I feel like had those things been explored, I might have ended up on the love side with this book, but here I am being a full-on hater. I feel like I was actually set up to like this book too, because I feel like this book feels like being a fly on the wall listening to these conversations that these characters are having, because I'm like the most nosy person ever. I'm not necessarily proud of the fact that I'm super nosy, but like I love knowing things. Like if I'm at a restaurant and like I hear some juicy gossip, like my ear somehow is picking up all the juicy gossip. I know nothing about these people, but if it's interesting gossip, I'm gonna be listening. And as a nosy person, this book is set up to be a favorite for me because like it is that. It's you basically just like reading these conversations that are happening. But I was just so bored out of my mind. These characters were just so vanilla, so boring, so just basic. I feel like it is also a book that like tries to be really meaningful and impactful, but just comes across as super pretentious. And like I really struggle with books like that, where you can just tell the author is trying so hard to just like be profound and make these like really profound statements to be like very quotable, to like have their quotes be put on mugs and t-shirts and things. But I just could not get on board with that. Like I was so just like taken out of the book every time it felt like it was like leaning into that, and I just it's like one of my biggest icks with books. I could rip this one up with more details, more things that I didn't like about it, but I'm gonna be a nice little boy and just like put this to rest and hopefully never think about it again unless I see it out in the wild, which I feel like I see Sally Rooney books all the time out in the wild, so I will prepare myself to be triggered with anger by this book. Next. You know what? It deserved that, okay? I didn't like that book, so it deserved that, but I did not mean to do that. Let me just be clear. The next book is Milk, Turkey, and Neurosis, or How Mother Almost Ruined My Life. This basically is just about this girl who just has all these absurd things happen to her all the time. It almost reads like a memoir, and a part of me thinks that like it must be based off real life situations. Some of the things felt like real life things that could happen, and then there were things where it was like, nope, this could never happen. I could see like the mother-daughter relationship in here being based off an actual mother-daughter relationship because it just felt very real, and it felt like some of their interactions could be based off actual interactions that they've had in real life. I feel like the overarching plot is the fact that like Gracie's mom always asks her about a boyfriend, and one day Gracie's like, you know what, I'm sick and tired of hearing this, I'm sick and tired of you asking about a boyfriend, and so she makes up the fact that she has a boyfriend. She's like, yeah, I got a boyfriend. Do I really have a boyfriend? No. I'll just lie and shut her up. But her mom's like, great, bring him to Thanksgiving dinner. And so of course Gracie like panics and begins to try and search and track down the man of her dreams to become her boyfriend so that she can bring a boyfriend to Thanksgiving dinner. This was a tough one for me because I felt like there were seeds of potential planted early on for it to be a banger of a book. But the book itself decided to go in a different direction. Mind you, there are bits of this book that I enjoyed. I really liked the writing style. I felt like it had like this very bubbly, light, and comedic writing style. Like I felt like the comedic timing was A+, chef's kiss. But there's also like some racist comments made and just like some very insensitive comments made by the mom in particular. And that just like made me really uncomfortable reading about. And those are things that I just can't let slide. So it's just something that like I can't overlook because it was like never like a teachable moment. It was never like she was being called out for saying these racist things either. It was just like, there's a racist bit, there's an insensitive comment, and we're just gonna keep moving on. And like, no, immediately no. On top of that, like the absurdness of just what our main character goes through is just too much. It's like, girl, at some point, you're gonna need to get it together because you're part of the problem. You get yourself in these sticky situations that are absurd and are so unrealistic. And that was another part of the problem, which I know this book is fiction, the sky's the limit, but like for me, I get lost if there's like too much nonsense happening, especially in a book where it's like supposed to be contemporary fiction. If there's like constantly these crazy things happening to you, it just like pulls me out of it. And I'm just like, this could never happen. Like you can't be waking up every day and just having like the craziest day of your life. Like that's just so unrealistic. I can't buy into that. And I just couldn't buy into this. If you want to know what nonsense I'm on about, some examples I have. Our main character has a guy pee in her gas tank at one point because her mom told her, if you run out of gas, get a man to pee in your tank. At one point, she's on a date with this guy and she's like hyperfixating on his mustache, and by the end of the date, he goes in to like kiss her and she leans over and just licks his mustache because she becomes so obsessed with his mustache and can't stop thinking about it. Not in a good way. She's like distracted the entire date by his mustache. Also flipping through this, I remembered it's very fat phobic. Like there's so many fat phobic comments made throughout this book. And again, the thing that makes me sad about this book is that like I saw its potential in the beginning. Like at the start, I was like, this is really funny. Like this has the potential to be a really great book. I could have really just found an underrated book that I can like shout to all of you to go out and read, but I can't do that. I can't do that with this book. I feel like the one thing that could have like won me over by the end of it is if we saw actual growth with any of the characters, and I just didn't see that. It never leads to any sort of development with the characters, and then by the end of it, I was just kind of like, wait a second, like what was the point of this book? Like was it just to be like a comedic funny book? Are we just learning about a character's life who is a mess? Because I just never felt like there was like any kind of full circle moment. I don't know, I just felt like this kind of sense of unsatisfiedness by the end of it. It didn't work for me. I'm sad about it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Let's move on. Next on I really need to stop doing that. Oh my god. These books are probably just mad about being on this list, so they're causing me chaos. But anyway, this book is We Had to Remove This Post. This is next on my list, and in this book we are following our main character Kaylee, who works as a social media monitor. So on the daily, she's seeing like all this like graphic content that is coming onto the social media platform that she's working on, which I feel like the social media platform that she's working on is somewhat like TikTok in this book, if I remember correctly. So she's seeing this like horrific and unsettling content on the daily. And it's about both like the weight of the job and just like how it affects somebody mentally, and the relationships and friendships that cycle throughout this workplace, and also like the dynamics that come into play. Here's the deal, y'all. The first 50 pages, incredibly gripping. I could not put this book down. I was so into it. I was so excited about it. I was like, finally, a book that has an amazing concept that I am obsessed with that is like knocking it out of the park. But then at some point in the story, it shifts into something completely different. And you know what that shift was? It was underwhelming. It's not what I signed up for, and I immediately wanted a refund. Again, the first 50 pages, immaculate. From then on, I let out the biggest ugh I didn't realize I was holding. I feel like there could have been so many amazing conversations had throughout this book, but instead it's more so just a book that is like filled with all these horrific things, but decides to not talk about any of it. Like it's just like, oh, this bad thing happened. Oh, I just saw this horrific thing, but we're not really gonna talk into it. We're not gonna delve into it. We're just gonna talk surface level here. Let's just let it sit there in a pile of nothingness. Let's just look at all these horrific things that are happening and not talk about them. I do get that this book is a lot more about the characters and the kind of like links that they go to survive this job, and like all the horrific things that they're going through, and how the workplace isn't really supporting them. Like I understand all of that, but even then I wasn't overly satisfied with the conversations that we were having about these characters that were being involved in this workplace. This was also a situation where I was excited about two things potentially happening in this book. One was like having all these conversations about the internet, people who work in jobs similar to this one where they have to like go through and like approve things, and having conversations about that. And then the other lane is the lane that I thought this book was actually going to be developed into. Like I think I read the description was like, oh, this is like a horror book, and sketchy things happen, horrific things happen. I'm getting upset talking about this book. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm like rehashing these feelings because I think that I was just so excited. This one had so much potential with the concept alone, but yet again, I'm going into a book thinking that I'm gonna get this like amazing concept and I'm let down. When will this stop happening? Maybe I need to like stop going in with the expectations that these concepts are gonna be amazing and then I'll enjoy them a little bit more. I just find it really difficult to leave my expectations behind when I'm opening up a book that I'm super excited about. I can't help that. The next book on my list is The Kingdom of Little Wounds. In this book, it takes place in Scandinavia in the not the 1900s, 1572 if I remember correctly. And in this book, a plague is breaking out the night of this princess's wedding, which let me just say, if you're getting married and a plague breaks out, that is a red flag. I'd run for the hills, sis. That just feels like such a bad omen. And in it, we are following a seamstress, a maid, and a queen, and their kind of worlds all end up getting tangled up. And they basically have to put up a fight in order to save themselves. I'm doing such a bad job describing this book. I just want to be very clear with you. But like, that's the vibe. That's the gist. I also feel like after reading this book, I just like blocked it out of my memory because I don't want to think about this book. Like, looking at this book makes me a little angry. I'll get to why. Let me explain why. I've been dreading talking about this one, if I'm being so for real right now, but the biggest thing that I will say is that I feel like this book needed to be edited like 10 more times before it hit publication. First up, the descriptions throughout this book are some of the most questionable I've ever read. They shake like milk jellies. Take a wild guess as to what's being described there. And that is only touching the surface with how absurd some of these descriptions get. Don't even get me started about Little Bird. Beyond that, the book itself is way too long, unnecessarily long, and this is partly in fault to the over-descriptiveness of it, because there are things that are described throughout this that are like not really benefiting the plot. They're just being over-described for no reason. And then because of that, like the pacing itself just like slows down immensely because you're having to stop every 5 seconds to have something very small, a small little detail be described to you in this unnecessary, immense way, and have that item that's being described not do anything, not serve any purpose. Just there to flex the writing skills. I got to a point where I was just like, were we just trying to meet a word count here? Is that what's happening here? Because that's what it feels like. And I felt disrespected by this book because it was wasting my time, my precious time. If it weren't for a video where I read BookTuber's worst books of 2022, I would not have read this book. I hope that I would have pushed it into DNF lane if it weren't for that video. You'll never catch me recommending this book, and if it's one of your favorite books of all time, I'm truly sorry for just sitting here and ripping this book to shreds. But I also do not feel like our reading taste will ever match up. So I'm sorry. The last book on my list might surprise some of you, might not surprise some of you, but that book is Chain of Thorns, the last book in the Last Hours trilogy by Cassandra Clare. I don't want to give too much away in regards to the description since this is the third book, but I will tell you about the series as a whole, the trilogy as a whole. Basically, in it, we are following our main character, Cordelia, who is moving to London after her dad has found himself in a bit of a sticky situation, and it kind of ruins the reputation of the family. So her mom, and her brother are moving to London in order to like save face and to basically like save their reputation. So she's found herself in London, and she's kind of meshing together with the Herondales and some other families within the Shadowhunter world. This begins to open up a whole new world for her, but things get a little bit complicated when demons start attacking London. This is another one that I've been dreading to talk about because I just know that the fandom is like so large and I don't want to like make anybody mad in sharing my feelings about this book, but like I am personally in my Shadowhunter fatigue era. I've been reading these books for so long that I just need them to come out and do something different. And I get that that's like a hard standard to meet, and it's not fair to the author to like hold them up to like a high standard and be like, this is what I need you to do. If you can't do it, I'm not gonna like your book. But like, I have just felt like these books have started, and maybe they've been doing this for a while, but like I've just picked up on it. They've started to like recycle tropes, and it's not bad that the tropes are being recycled, but they're not being executed in a way that feels new or fresh or is bringing something new to these stories. And the tropes that we're seeing recycled are tropes that have been used in other Shadowhunter books, which is what is upsetting me the most, I think. And I feel like a lot of the characters too have overlapping personality traits, and I get that like there's so many characters that there's bound to be characters that feel similar, and also there's like a lot of like family lines running through the Shadowhunter books. Like they're all connected in some kind of ways, so they will have some sort of like resemblance, I guess, in some cases, but I'm just tired, hence the Shadowhunter fatigue era that I'm currently in. This one also, in my opinion, was ungodly long for no reason. Like, it just lagged and lagged and lagged, and I was just like, can it be over yet? Like, it's never fun when you're reading a book and you're just like sitting there and you're like, can I be done with this yet? Can we reach the end yet? That's how I'm feeling. I just want to reach the end and be done with it. And also, it's one of those books where it's like, how can everything be happening and yet nothing be happening at all? Like, I know that that's so confusing, but like, that's how I felt while reading this book. Like, there were things that were happening, but I was also like, nothing is happening at the same time. I will still keep reading the Shadowhunter books because it feels really stupid to just be like, yeah, I'm done, I'm checking out, when I'm so far into it. But like, I need a breather. I need a break. I need a little bit of distance between us before I can come back to them. I need a moment to decompress and approach them with a different attitude, a different mindset, because they just don't hit the same as they used to. I'm gonna be so for real with you guys. And I know that that's partly because I've changed. I don't typically get nervous about posting like unpopular opinions, but like for some reason talking bad about Shadowhunters just like feels so hard for me. Like, I feel like people are gonna come for me, but please don't come for me. It just didn't work out for me. And I feel like I have solid reasoning as to why it didn't work for me. So anyway. Those were my top 5 worst books of 2023. Let me know down below in the comments if any of you guys have read any of these books and what your thoughts are on them. Were you surprised by any of the books on this list? Let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments. I also want to know what some of your worst books were that you read in 2023. Let me know down below in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to go and hit that like button. If you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe or go and hit that bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope today is bright, that tomorrow is brighter. Keep reading what your heart desires, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye, yo!